Hello and welcome to Man, Woman, God. I'm Nikki Cauchi, your host, and tonight my special guest is Jane Keil, who works for an organisation called Streets of Freedom. Streets of Freedom help women who are affected by sexual exploitation. Jane, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nikki. It's an honour to be here.
And it's great to have you, and I'm so glad that you were able to come and share a little bit about Streets of Freedom. But Jane, before we do that, because we always like to ask people on the show, because we always like to get to know people a little bit better, let me just ask you a little bit about yourself, because I know at the age of 8, something really significant happened to you.
That's correct, yes. At the age of 8, my mother died of cancer, and it was a really traumatic time for an 8-year-old, as you can imagine. My father remarried soon after, and I then inherited a step family, so that was also a really difficult environment to grow up in. So I, turned into a teenager who was feeling really unloved, worthless, and didn't really have a voice, I believe.
And so Jane, what happens to a girl at 8 years old who's affected by, their mother dying? How do you cope with all of that?
Well, not terribly well in those days. It was quite a long time ago, and now there's things like counselling. People are a lot more open about death. I wasn't even allowed to go to her funeral, which I believe was that was quite significant in my heart, and I guess I didn't cope terribly well at all with that.
Now, at the age of 15, you actually left school, which is not very common nowadays.
No, not at all.
So why did you do that? What was that? Who made that decision?
Okay, I guess it was really a family decision because for financial reasons, and a lot of people left school in year 10 when I did. I didn't even finish year 10 and went on to work in admin type roles, which really wasn't my passion. I think my passion got pushed down. My passion was to be a writer or a journalist, along those lines, and because I just had a purpose to earn some money and pretty much get out of school to get out into the world, basically.
Now also, Jane, you started experimenting with alcohol in your teens. Just talk to us a little bit about that.
Okay, I guess I wasn't really aware how much I was hurting, and I was looking for something to fill a bit of a hole in my life to make me a nice person. I didn't realise then that I actually don't need alcohol to be a nice person. I started experimenting with alcohol when I was about 13 or 14 with some girlfriends at their homes when their parents were out. It soon turned into something quite serious because at one stage it became life-threatening for the fact that the amount of alcohol I was consuming in a really short period of time. But at the time I had no idea what I was doing. So now, Jane,
that sort of problem escalated a little bit during your teens and into your 20s. So
that's correct.
So you did struggle with alcohol?
I did. I used it as a crux, and at the time I didn't know it was a crux. And there was, I guess I hurt a lot of people through my alcohol abuse, and there was other forms of self-abuse as well. I was just digging a really big hole for myself, but I thought I was the real party girl and fun and great to be around, but I don't really think that's how people saw me.
So at the end of your 20s, you met your husband, who was actually a Christian. So tell me all about that.
Yes, that's an interesting story in itself, Nikki. I was 28 years old when I met my husband, and when I met him I thought he was really cute and I didn't know he was a Christian. As I got to know him, just one day I asked him a question about going somewhere with me, and he basically said, "Oh, well, I'll actually be at church." Well, blew me away because I had a really, really big wall up against God, because I didn't believe that there would be a loving God there if my mother had died, and all the stuff that I'd been going through in my upbringing. So I found that really confronting. So I actually didn't ask him again. I just sort of pushed it aside and went, okay, I'll still go out with this guy, but we'll just leave that over, park this over here. I don't really want to know about that.
So then you got married.
Yes.
And after that, tell me what happened, because you did give your life over to the Lord.
Well, I did. This is an amazing story, I believe it is. And we were going on a holiday. We were driving to Darwin. And on our last leg to Darwin, we'd had car trouble and we stopped in Catherine. The car was fixed and we were driving to Darwin, and it was early evening. The sun had started to set in the sky and it looked amazing, but I was actually sitting there in the car, in the passenger seat, panicking incredibly, but verbally panicking to Steve, and basically said to him, you know, these are all the horror stories that I've heard about. Buffalo coming out onto the road at night, whole families are wiped out in car accidents. So he wasn't worried at all. So my stress levels were huge at this time, and I was looking out the window thinking we were going to be killed. And an image of Jesus appeared in the sky. Jesus stood there, plain as I'm looking at you now, Nikki. Jesus stood there and he had his arms out in the direction where we're going, where we were driving. And I was confused but amazed, and I kept looking from the vision to Steve and backwards and forwards, thinking, I've really got to share what I'm seeing here. But the other part of me said, no, you can't, because he'll think you've lost the plot. So looking back into the sky, and from the top of my head through my entire body, it felt like somebody had poured warm, tingly oil. So as that occurred, I felt peace, love, safety, joy, and much more, all rolled into one. And I knew then and there that God was real. So, you know, Jesus was real, God was real, and I was safe. There was nothing going to happen to us, and I was just loved far more than I could ever imagine.
Jane, that is amazing. We're going to have to take a break. I want to come back and I'll talk a little bit more about your healing after you became a Christian.
Thank you.
So we'll be back after the break. Welcome back. I'm speaking with Jane Keil. Now, Jane, in the last segment, you shared your testimony, which was, I have to say, amazing. And I just want to talk about just your healing after that, because you did have some significant healing from your problem with alcohol.
That's correct, Nikki. Look, my healing journey has been the last 25 years, and it's still going on. I've had a lot of healing, and I think as we heal, there's layer upon layer that comes off, and our heart is healed even more. And that can only happen with that personal relationship with Jesus. I think that basically there's no such thing as an instantaneous healing. Yes, I had an amazing encounter with God, but it just really does take time.
And there's also, I remember you saying that there's also there were thoughts of feeling of unworthiness that kept popping up as well. How did you deal with all of that?
Sure. I think basically the unworthiness that came was as I created, or as I had a personal relationship with Jesus, I got closer and focused more on him. I was pressing in and saying, hey, look, I feel like I've wasted half of my life. What have you got for me to do for you? And as I was sort of crying out to him, I would start having these feelings of, well, you know, how can God use you? You've left school at year 10, you don't have a degree, yes, you can talk and you know, you're a nice person, but if you don't have all these things around you, like a really good education, how can God use you? So I guess those were feelings of unworthiness as I started on the healing journey.
And so what's God been speaking to you about with that feeling of unworthiness? How do you deal with that? Because obviously it comes up every now and again. What do you do? Because there'd be a lot of people out there, Jane, that would feel the same way that you have been feeling. How do you reach out to them? How do you help them to deal with this?
Look, I know who I am. I really know who I am in God's eyes. And as I feel more worthy day by day, month by month, the whole point is, I think if you can focus on God and what He really knows about you, your heart does change, and you feel so much bigger and more beautiful than you can ever imagine, because you know that what God thinks of you. We don't have to strive to be better or learn lots of things or have an amazing job or the perfect family. God will just use any one of us. I'm just an ordinary woman, and God's just used me, and He's going to continue to use me to do great things for Him.
I love that, Jane, and thank you so much for that, because you know what, I think there are a lot of people out there who'd be going on a journey, and it'd be like there is no quick, instantaneous cure. And I think sometimes we seek that because we just want, and I love that you said, you know, it has been a really long time and a really big journey for you, because God's just building character in you and changing you and showing you. And I love that you could, you know, that you recognise that and you don't want that quick cure, because, you know, that doesn't, where does that take you really? It doesn't sort of build a character in you, does it?
That's correct. Well, in the area of alcohol, I guess, you know, now I can actually really enjoy a glass of really good wine.
That's
and
great.
I think we're meant to.
Yes.
I don't have the dependency on it. It's not there to fill a hole. It's there to enjoy, because, you know, God's given us so many amazing things to enjoy, not to be afraid of. So
that's fantastic. Okay, let's talk about Streets of Freedom, because I have to say, I love the name, Streets of Freedom. It's like so liberating. It's great. Tell me all about it, because how did you come up with the name? When was it started?
Sure. Two of my girlfriends started the organisation. Previously, we'd been in an organisation in Australia together who raised awareness of sex trafficking overseas, and they and I left the organisation at different times, but these two wonderful women, they sought God on, you know, what they could do in Australia, because they had a strong feeling and leading that there was a problem in Australia that needed to be addressed. So as I came together with them, they actually founded the organisation in 2010. It is founded on prayer, and the name is from God.
It's a great name, I have to say. What do you do? What do you do in Streets of Freedom? How do you reach these women?
Okay, we do many things, but I guess our main purpose is to support them. At this point in time, we go into the brothels of Melbourne, we visit women, and we ask them, you know, what would you like us to do for you? We generally do have things that we would like to do for them, but we don't want to think that our list is the correct list. So we're saying to them, you know, what can we do? Do you need help with homelessness? Do you need help with counselling, finance, relationship retraining, you know, many things, and just building relationship with them and being their friend.
Now, Jane, I have to say, I'm a bit confused by this, because how are you allowed to go in there? How did the owners of these brothels say, okay, I just want a bunch of Christian women can just come on in and do whatever they want? How do you get allowed to go into these places?
Well, initially there's prayer. We have people pray around the brothels, you know, street prayer teams, and we actually then go and knock on the door. And we take gifts for the women, beauty gifts, chocolates, flowers, you know, whatever it might be, and we just ask to see the women. And initially the managers, or the gatekeeper as we might call them, they are a little suspicious, and they're wondering why we want to actually bring gifts to the women. We explain we're a support organisation, and we're just here to help the women if they have any needs at all.
Now, what do you talk to these women about? Because you do go in there going, you need Jesus Christ in your life.
Not at all. Look, coming from my background, that would be the worst thing that you could do to any woman, I believe, who doesn't have that personal relationship with God. So we go in, we don't mention God at all, and we just go in and we love the women. We talk about family, obviously safe boundaries, but family, we talk about friends, we talk about women's stuff. You know, it's like you and I sitting here having a chat, Nikki. It's just all about relationship and non-judgmental one at that.
Fantastic. We're going to take another break, Jane, but I want to come back and talk a little bit more about Streets of Freedom and what you do there. So we'll be back after the break. Welcome back. I'm speaking with Jane Keil, who works in an organisation called Streets of Freedom. Jane, we were talking all about Streets of Freedom, which is an amazing organisation, but I want to know about your role, because I know that you started off, when the organisation first started, you started off doing admin.
That's correct.
And which of course is what you what you were geared to do.
I guess there was a need there. And although my dreams in the organisation were to come alongside women, initially you just have to do what you have to do to get something going. So I, did various admin roles in the organisation just to help the founders, lay those foundations in the organisation. And then I've moved on to outreach team, where we visit the women in the brothels like we discussed before, and I also mentor one of the girls who has left the industry.
Okay, so Jane, what about this progression? Did you feel like, did you sort of go from admin going, yes, I really want to go into the brothels, or was there a bit of hesitancy from you about moving into that area? Like, how did you feel about going in and speaking to these women? Are you confident doing it?
Not really. I did my admin role, but at the same time I was part of a prayer team, and also I used to, when we visit the women in the brothels, we have two people that go in and someone remains in the car as a contact and also to pray. So I stayed in my safe place in the car and prayed, and I felt that God just kept nudging me and saying, hey, come on, you can do more than this. This is a really safe place, praying in the car. So one day I just, turned up and I said, okay, today's the day. And I went in for my first brothel visit. And on that day there was not an absence of fear, because I didn't know what lay behind that door. But it was interesting, because there was some months earlier we had been praying around our organisation and the women that we want to reach, and God showed me a vision. He showed me a vision of basically it was a glass floor, and underneath that floor there was many women that were trapped. They were very distressed, and that really upset me considerably. I looked at this floor and I thought, well, it's a floor to them, but a floor to us, but it might be a ceiling to these women. And I thought, well, I have to trust that God can break through here and whatever he's going to do. So on that first day that I went in for my first brothel visit, again, I was a bit fearful, but I went in and just it was just a divine appointment. Had an amazing chat with one of the girls, and it just went perfectly. So we came outside, and the first thing that God showed me was that same vision again of that glass floor, and this time it had a crack in it. So I believe God showed me that as I trusted him and I just stepped out of my comfort zone, he would break through.
So Jane, because you've also had brothel owners say, no, you can't come in, have stopped you from actually coming in. So tell me, how did you deal with that?
Sure. It was challenging and disappointing, because as we build relationship with the door people or the managers, it's a great thing. But then when they do say, look, we don't want you to come in for a particular reason, it is confronting, but we just then have to really press into God and say, hey God, you've got, you want us to visit these women, so you need to make a way where there is no way. And over time, through prayer, those doors have opened again. It's been an absolute miracle that the doors have actually reopened.
Now, I want you to tell me a story about Anna, who is actually not really her real name, but
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about Anna, because that's an amazing, lovely story.
Well, Anna is a lady that we visited at one of the brothels and, had quite a good relationship with over a period of time. We visited another brothel one day, and she actually came into the foyer to meet us, because this was one of the brothels we weren't allowed into. And she was so excited to see us. I said to her, you know, how are you going? And she said, fine. And she said, oh, look, you know, when you brought the Christmas gifts into us, she said, you actually, when I used the body lotion you gave me, it made me feel like a little girl again now. And she looked really wistful as she spoke. So, you know, that really impacted me. You know, she went on to say that when you bring the gifts into us, you know, it is out of love. We know that. So I was pretty choked up. But, you know, I went to a brothel again and bumped into her again, and she said to me, you know, I ran out of this, and I said to her, well, look, I'm more than happy to bring you some more, you know, beauty products. And she said, oh, don't go to any trouble, you know. But we did. So one day we visited again and she was there. She couldn't actually believe that we'd gone out of our way to bring something to her, and what we had said was true. We didn't let her down. You know, we made a promise and we turned up, and she was blown away.
That's fantastic. So. Now, Jane, tell me a little bit about challenges. Well, personally, you know, joining an organisation like this, you know, Satan's not going to leave you alone. He's
Exactly.
going to want to get you. So what have been some of the challenges you've experienced whilst you were being part of this organisation?
I guess it really still is around feeling that I am a little unworthy. And I don't say a little unworthy because it's a thing that I've struggled with for a long time. I believe that maybe is just a little, you know, an area that the devil will try and get to me.
Sure.
I know that I'm worthy, but there's just the times where, you know, just a few buttons get pressed for whatever reason, and I have to just push past it and go, no, this is crazy. You know, I wouldn't actually be sitting here today.
That's amazing. But also I want to say to you is that, you know, for such a time as this, God has you here. So he's actually brought you through so much in your past for what you've gone through to bring you to right now to help these women who have obviously probably do struggle with alcohol, feelings of unworthiness, which, you know, hey, it's huge. And, you know, what would you say to, you know, people out there who are struggling with all of this?
God can use you as he's used me, and, you know, the journey can be a long one. Just to keep trusting him and have that personal relationship with him, because he can get you through anything. Nothing is insurmountable with God, and he will just bring the best out in you, and just if you allow him to just show you how precious you are and how worthy you are in his eyes.
Jane, you have been an amazing guest. I love your testimony. I love what you're doing out there on the streets. I just want to thank you so much for coming and sharing.
Thank you, Nikki.
Well, that's all we have for tonight. So from me, Nikki Cauchi, on Man, Woman, God, God bless you. Good night.